It's an absolutely beautiful winter's afternoon, early afternoon now. And this is Kirton Wood. It's a place that I don't come to very often, but I do have a permit to run a moth trap here, and I hope to do that on a couple of occasions during the course of this coming year. So only a small wood. It's a wood that I've featured before. Dark bush cricket is here, one of only 2 sites in Nottinghamshire, but it's also a good site for looking for the eggs of white-letter hare streak, and I will be looking for those eggs while I'm here. Otherwise, it's just a little walk, get a breath of fresh air on an absolutely beautiful day. It's a beautiful little woodland, Kirton Wood. I say it's of no real size, just a few acres, and it's dominated by ash and elm. Most of the elm is gone, but there's a lot of wych elm here, and there's still some English elm regrowth that keeps appearing. Perhaps the best time to visit this wood is in May, because the whole of the understory becomes beautifully, almost mist-like, with a range of umbellifers. When they're flowering and the wild garlic is also coming through and flowering, it's an absolutely stunning spectacle with a stunning smell. It's beautiful. This is the centre of Kirton Wood. I love this little spot. It's in sort of opened up. A lot of coppicing goes on here, but I do worry about the future of how this wood will look, with most of the trees that you can see being ash, and what with ash dieback disease rife and rampant probably throughout most of the UK, I believe, but certainly in Nottinghamshire. Will this wood almost just become a large coppice? Will any more ash trees get to the height of these that you can see? It's having an effect, ash dieback, but I must admit it's not the effect that I was expecting. At least not at the moment. Hopefully it remains that way. Often surprises people how they can find fungi even during the middle of winter and after a very cold snap that we've just had. This, I believe, is velvet shank. It certainly looks like it. Quite beautiful, lovely, sort of chestnut colour. Absolutely beautiful, and copious amounts of it coming out of this old tree, which looks to be an old elm. It's a lovely sight on a winter's day. A touch of colour from a fungi. This is the ideal January day here. Not a breath of wind. That sun is pleasantly warm, not quite as warm as yesterday, but green woodpecker even calling. I've heard great spotted woodpecker drumming. There's a whole range of other bird calls. Quite surprising how things change, not just visually, with the nights starting to draw out. By the time you get to the middle of January, you start to get to notice them, but it's audibly too. Woodland becomes increasingly more noisy to the sound of birds as we get past Christmas and into the new year. All makes a difference. Spring, although it might seem a long way away, it really isn't. It soon creeps up on you. There's lots of little signs. Hazel catkins. I've seen some hazel catkins out since Christmas Day. Lots of things are starting to bud and to break open, and then they get to pause while the temperature drops for a week or so, and that will definitely happen. It's just lovely to stand here and have 5 minutes enjoying that January sun. You can't say that very often in the UK, and just listening to the songs and the calls of Kirton Wood's woodland birds. Very pleasant way to spend an hour. Even the green woodpecker thinks so. There's been some recent work to this part of Kirton Wood, this central area, and it's work it's coppicing work, but the coppicing shrubs that have been coppiced a number of times over recent years. Now, I'm quite well known amongst local conservation organisations for being rather, well, anti a lot of what they do, really, or how they do it. And coppicing is one thing. I think coppicing is largely overrated in the way that it's done. It's left too long where it is coppice and nothing can grow. I mean, to me, the whole idea of coppicing is to, if you're not going to use the materials, is to cut things down, opens up the woodland floor to sunlight, and that increases the amount of ground flora that you get in woodland flowers. Method that's been done here is reasonably fine, I suppose. Everything's been cut down, all the old coppices have been cut down, but that coppice material has just been piled up in numerous piles. So any advantage you're gaining by cutting the material, the growing material down to increase the amount of sunlight that can get to the forest floor, is rather negated and made futile by the fact that the coppice material itself that's been cut is piled up and covering the woodland floor, stopping the sunlight from getting to it and stopping woodland flora from growing in its place. Now, I suppose they'll say that these brash piles are good places for invertebrates, and indeed they are, but we really ought to be looking at the bigger picture here. And quite frankly, with this coppice material, if it's not going to be used, they might as well just make a nice bonfire in the middle and get some potatoes and keep themselves warm for an hour, because nothing's effective here. Nothing benefits. Might as well burn the material that's been cut off. Keeps that wooden floor open, dries it out, because Kirton Wood is a very wet woodland. It's nearly always muddy. Lots of moss grows at Curton. It's great for mosses. Anyway, we'll go a little bit further, see if we can turn anything up down the sunny southern section of Kirton Wood. This is the southern edge of Kirton Wood. It's very sheltered here from the prevailing westerly winds that we have here in the UK. And this wide grassy ride, there's a hedge on one side and a bit of a shallow ditch. It does sort of drop into a little mini dumble, so to speak, and then it's grass and cultivated fields the other side of that. But It's a really good little hedge because it's quite flower rich during the spring and summer months, and because it's sheltered even on a coolish sort of day, not like the mild one we have today, it's a good place to look for insects, and the trunks of trees are the best places to look, because if you get any amount of sunshine on even on a winter's day, those trunks of the trees will become increasingly warm, and that warmth attracts a range of invertebrates. Today it's mostly the humble bluebottle, Calliphora vicina, a species which I admire greatly, which I love to see. It's usually the last insect I see in a year and the first insect I see in a year, but I remember the days when you wouldn't see them even in January. But now, even on days where the temperature is only just above zero, you can get them out and about, and it always gives me my first of the year sort of insect fix, so to speak. But it's a species which does a marvellous job anyway, and we should be quite thankful for it, and rather than persecute it all the time. But there's a number of them on these trees down this side here, but hopefully there may well be something else a little bit more interesting than the humble bluebottle. Beautiful. It's the perfect afternoon. That's looking east away from Kirton Wood, heading towards sort of Tuxford way if you've got a map. I'm not going as far as Tuxford, I'm heading back uphill in a minute, back towards the car. I've not been successful in finding any white letter hairstreak eggs, but in all honesty, where I was going to, or I intended to look for white letter hairstreak eggs, there's no suitable material left. It's all been cut. This part of Nottinghamshire suffers a lot from indiscriminate cutting. I know farmers and conservation organisations will say, oh, we can't afford to pick at what we cut, we have to just either cut or we don't cut. And so one of the reasons why some species of butterflies and moths are struggling is without a doubt because a lot of the material which would hold the eggs over winter, or hold the young larvae on over winter, get cut on an annual basis, either late in the autumn or during winter or even early spring. It's just how it is, I'm afraid, here over much of the UK and, well, much of Nottinghamshire certainly. Still, it's been a grand day, a grand hour and a bit really. Absolutely beautiful, and judging by the clear sky, lower temperatures are forecasted tonight. Still, I had a good night last night moth trapping, if you've not seen the video. So I walked back to the car on what is a beautiful January day.